Hey everybody, it's Lon.TV, and today we're taking a look at the Lenovo Legion Go. This is another portable gaming PC from a major PC manufacturer, and this one runs Windows and has some neat hardware features that are lacking on some of the competitors that we have looked at. And we are going to take a close look at this device in just a second, but I do want to let you know, in the interest of full disclosure, this came in free of charge from Lenovo. However, all the opinions you're about to hear are my own. No one is paying for this review, nor has anyone reviewed or approved what you're about to see before it was uploaded. So let's get into it now and see what the Legion Go is all about. Now, the price point on this comes in at $699 for the 512 gigabyte version. There is a 1 terabyte version that costs a little bit more. The hardware is the same across all of the different tiers. Inside, you have an AMD Ryzen Z1 Extreme processor that can run it up to 30 watts. This is the same chip that's in the Asus ROG Ally, which we reviewed a couple of weeks ago. And so this is considerably more powerful than the Steam Deck, although one might wonder, is it necessary on a handheld device with a very small screen? But nonetheless, if you do dock it, you will get better performance on this than you would with a Steam Deck, and I found it pretty much on par with the Asus device. It has 16 gigabytes of LDDR5X 7500 RAM on board. That is not upgradable, and you can, though, upgrade the storage, and this is a shot from a live stream I did the other day, and in the lower right-hand corner of the image there is where that NVMe is located. You can swap it out with a larger one and get going with more storage if you need it, so that's something to consider if you are trying to figure out which version of this to get. It feels pretty nice. It is a bit larger than some of the other handhelds we've looked at, so it is noticeably bulkier than the Steam Deck is, and that's partly because it has a much larger display. So the display on these comes in at 8.8 inches versus 7 inches on the ROG Ally and the Steam Deck. It runs at a 2560 by 1600 resolution. It has 500 nits of brightness, and it can run it up to 144 hertz. It also has some of the variable refresh rate features as well, which on this kind of hardware you really need to get the best out of it. Unfortunately, though, you're not going to get anywhere near the full performance of the display with any AAA titles. I think the reality for most games is you're going to be probably in the 60 frames per second territory or less, depending on how you configure the settings in the game. Although these little handhelds are getting more and more powerful, there's still no match for a PC with a discrete GPU. But the display is noticeably better than some of the other ones on the market. It weighs 1.88 pounds or 854 grams. The Steam Deck, by comparison, is 1.47 pounds or 669 grams. And I'm referring to the older Steam Deck. They just announced a new one this past week, which I think might be a little lighter. So definitely bigger and bulkier. But what I like about this so far is that it has hardware features that are lacking on all of the other major brand competitors like the Asus and the Steam Deck. The first is that these controllers, which I'll get into in more detail in a minute, can be detached, and they work wirelessly when they are detached, so that's pretty neat. We'll talk more about the controllers, though, in a minute. What I also like about it is that it has a kickstand that's built into the back. It just slides in like that when it's not in use, so it's kind of nice to be able to prop it up and get another game controller attached and have multiplayer gaming without having to carry around anything extra with you. A big feature of this one that I like quite a bit is the fact that it has 2 USB Type-C ports. We've got one on the top, and we've got one on the bottom. Now, what's really cool about the USB-C ports on the Legion Go is that they are 40 gigabit per second USB 4 ports. That means they are compatible with Thunderbolt devices. So if you wanted to dock this to an eGPU, you can do it. In fact, that's exactly what I did a little while ago. So on the right-hand side there, I've got the lower port connected to a Thunderbolt 3 cable that's going out to my GPU enclosure. And then on the top port, I was running power to the Legion Go because my eGPU doesn't actually pass power to the device that's connected to it. And I got it working here, so we were able to run Starfield here through my enclosure. I only have an NVIDIA 1070 in there at the moment, so it doesn't run as quickly as it could. But still, it's conceivable with this device that when you get home, you can dock it up with an external graphics enclosure like this and be able to run it more like a regular gaming PC. And I think it's a really fun way to be able to make dual use of this device. It is probably the most dockable handheld PC that's out there, at least from a major brand. By comparison, the ROG Ally has a port for eGPUs, but it's proprietary to Asus. And on the Steam Deck, it's only a regular USB 3.2 Gen 2 port that's not compatible with Thunderbolt. So it's nice to see that they added some very useful ports to this that make docking a real possibility with it. Now, in addition to the USB Type-C ports, you also have an SD card slot for augmenting the onboard storage. There are many games that run just fine off of an SD card. What I would recommend you look for is an SD card that has an A2 label on it, which makes it a little better for the types of reads and writes that games typically do. And although there are many AAA titles that need the full disk bandwidth of an NVMe SSD, there are many more games that don't. So I would look at maybe getting an SD card first to see if it helps you with your storage problem before you take the thing apart and install another NVMe. You also have a headphone microphone jack here. If you want to connect up headphones, you can do that over Bluetooth also if you want. I have read some complaints about the speakers on the top here. They're not spectacular. I didn't find them as offensive as some reviewers did, but if you are looking for a full range of sound out of this, I would suggest connecting up those headphones either through the port here or over Bluetooth, which this also supports. It does have Wi-Fi 6 on board for getting your games onto it quickly. And what this is running, though, under the hood is Windows 11. So when you make the launcher go away here with the push of a button, you will be presented with the Windows desktop. And one of my complaints about the ROG Ally that we looked at not too long ago is that it, too, is based on Windows. And unfortunately, you will find yourself having to navigate the Windows interface to configure things every once in a while, or to install a game that you might need to install every once in a while. It does bring you the value of compatibility with just about anything that can run on Windows, but it sometimes is a little bit clunky to operate Windows through a touch display. But of course, you could connect up a keyboard and trackpad for when you need to do those sorts of things. It does, though, of course, support Microsoft's Gamepass service. I am a Gamepass Ultimate subscriber, so I can download all the PC games that are available there and play them on this device, along with streaming them if I want to do that. And of course, it supports Steam and Epic and just about any other platform that might be available that can run on Windows. So you do have a lot of flexibility and compatibility, but it's a little clunky every once in a while when you have to go out to the Windows desktop. But I did find the launcher to be pretty easy to use. It's doing a pretty good job of detecting the games that I have installed on my device here, and I can launch them without having to go out into the Steam library, for example, first, or over to the Xbox app. However, what you'll run into with Game Pass is that the EA games that you can get on Game Pass also require that you install the EA app and log into that. So there's some things, again, that are going to create a little bit of clunkiness as you're working your way through. Now, you can also configure your Legion Go with the gear icon here on the bottom. And what I would like to draw your attention to is the performance section here, because this is where you can dial in how this device will perform. Now, right now, I've got it on the performance mode, and this is going to give you a 20-watt TDP to the processor, but you also have a custom command here, which gives you a lot more flexibility. So you can dial in a specific wattage that you want the processor to operate at and get it to where you want it to be. I've just turned mine up to 30 watts. That is going to eat up the battery even more than the 20-watt version will. But if you want the absolute best performance, you can dial it in. And of course, if you're plugged in, you can make use of that 30-watt power indefinitely. You also have a fan speed setting here. If you put this on, the fan's going to run full blast all the time. You might get more consistent performance out of it, but it will be a little bit more on the noisy side. And you also have the option here for the Radeon Super Resolution, which will do some upscaling to make things look a little better. One advantage of having a smaller display is that you can run games at lower resolutions and not have some of the details be as noticeable to you. So for example, a little bit earlier, I ran Red Dead Redemption 2 at 720p, and I was getting about 60 frames per second out of it, give or take. And it looked okay to me. Certainly, if you look a little closer, you'll see some of the fuzziness of a 720p resolution. But if you're someone who really wants the best frame rate possible, you can get there with many games by just putting that display performance down to 720p. Actually, in this case, I think we were at 1280 by 800 to match the 16 by 10 aspect ratio of the display. It'll look a lot better at 1920 by 1200 here, of course, but it doesn't run as well when you do that. So this is some of the trade-offs you have to make with these handheld devices. They just don't have the horsepower to deliver the super high resolutions that their display supports. And you can forget about running it at the native resolution of the display, which is 2560 by 1600. So just dial things in and see how it runs. You will spend some time, I think, adjusting settings a little bit more on this device than you will on a Steam Deck, where the games kind of get configured for the hardware. But you will, like any other gaming PC, have to spend some time configuring the settings of each particular game to get the most out of them. This is No Man's Sky that I ran at its standard settings at 1920 by 1200, and I was able to get between 45 and 60 frames per second, depending on what was going on in the scene. But it was definitely very playable here. All of these games we were running at the 30-watt TDP, so you'll see a little bit of a performance hit when you're at the 20-watt TDP. And of course, battery life is a consideration here as well. So typically when you're at 30 watts, you're not going to get much out of the battery, maybe 90 minutes or so. You get a little bit more probably in the 2-hour amount when you're doing the 20-watt. And of course, a lot of this varies based on how demanding the game is as well. But just be prepared to keep a power source nearby like you need to on many of the other handheld gaming PCs out there. The Steam Deck did just recently rev its processor to be a little bit more efficient, so that one might now get better battery life than some of these, but these are more powerful, and you have to decide what you want out of your handheld gaming PC. I also managed to get Starfield running on this. I had to turn the settings way down. I also adjusted its rendering to be 50% to get it to run at a decent playable frame rate. But as you can see here, it actually is playable now. And although the battery won't last too long with it, it is something that I can lean back on my couch and play, and then go upstairs to my bigger PC and have my game save sync up with that, or even my Xbox. So you can definitely play Starfield on here with some tweaking, and it was a pretty good experience overall. Now, before we move off of Starfield here, I did want to show you my settings screen that I had set up for what you just saw. Again, that render resolution size down to 50%, everything on low. Another thing that I did do, which I do think made an impact, was to go into the BIOS and adjust the UMA frame buffer size. It looks like by default, it allocates about 3 gigabytes of memory for the video RAM, because it does have to share the memory with the video system. I turned mine up to 4 gigabytes, and that seemed to make Starfield run a little bit better. So if you're having trouble with games, jump into the BIOS and adjust that setting to balance the RAM out differently. To get into the BIOS, you have to hold down the volume up button and turn the power button on when you boot. It would have been nice to be able to adjust this setting inside of that Legion Space app, as opposed to having to go into the BIOS to do it. And I'm sure they could probably make some adjustments in the future to allow you to adjust this on the fly. And on the 3D Mark TimeSpy benchmark test, we got a score of 3,327 running in the 30-watt configuration. Of note here is that I looked at a Lenovo Yoga C940 laptop a couple of years ago that had a 9th generation i7 and a GTX 1650 GPU, and we got pretty much the same score here. So it's amazing how far along these very portable handheld PCs have become in a very short period of time. Also of note, we got a score of 3,064 on the ROG Ally that has the same chip, so the Legion Go did a little bit better in my testing. And as you can see here, the Steam Deck lags behind all of them because it doesn't have as powerful of an APU on board. However, remember, the Steam Deck is running with a 7-inch display, so you don't necessarily need to have a super high resolution like you have on this one to have the game look nice. So I think they're able to get away with a little less horsepower because of the display that they have on board. And even the new Steam Deck, which was just announced, didn't really up the performance all that much, but they did up the efficiency. So that Steam Deck is going to do better on battery than the current one, and certainly better on battery than this device will. And I think what we're seeing out there is that people are buying handheld PCs not to dock, but to use as a handheld. And battery life might be the most important thing. We'll have to see who becomes the market leader now that we have 3 choices from 3 big brands to choose from. We also ran the 3D Mark stress test, which runs a graphical benchmark over and over again to see how much performance we lose over time. And there we got a failing grade of 92%. 97% is passing. So this indicates you'll probably lose about 8% of the system's performance when it's under heavy sustained load. And you can also see what the temperatures were when that test concluded. Now you can pull up the launcher anytime by pushing the button here, and sometimes it doesn't always respond, but there it goes. And one thing to keep in mind though is that if you do run another game while you're in one that's currently running, it's not going to quit for you because ultimately you are running Windows here, so just be aware of that. Additionally, this button will pull up a sidebar where you can get quick access to things like the screen brightness and the volume. You can also change the resolution of the display very quickly here. So if you did want to dial it down to a native 1280 by 800, you could do that. You can also adjust the refresh rate here on the fly. You have some lighting effects for the power button and the thumbsticks here, along with a few mapping controls. Additionally, you can adjust the power level here on the fly as well. So you can do all of this right in the middle of the game and then push the button here to dismiss it most of the time. And sometimes, again, because we're running on Windows here, these controls get a little bit clunky. Now, I want to spend some time talking about the controls on here. I think they've done a lot of cool things with them, and there's some things that need some improvement. I want to begin with the thumbsticks, which are Hall effect sticks, which means they're using a magnet to sense the stick position versus potentiometers that you see in your typical Alps control sticks. And Hall effect sticks are becoming more and more preferable, and we're seeing more and more controllers made with them, and it was great to see them bake them in to this product. The problem, though, is that a lot of the advantages in sensitivity that you get with a Hall effect stick are kind of lost here because they have a huge dead zone. So check this out. I'm going to move this stick here, and it takes this much movement to get anything to register. So you don't have much room here between the center and the full extension, because the dead zone is so large here before anything happens. And I think this is something they could fix with some adjustments. And Hall effect sticks are known for not drifting, and one of the reasons why you may have a larger dead zone on a controller is because they are prone to drift, but these aren't, so they should give the user a little bit more control in the operating system. For now, they suggest making these adjustments in your game, but you're starting off with this very large dead zone at the hardware level. And it is noticeable as you're playing games. Here's No Man's Sky again that I played a little bit earlier, and you can see how much movement it takes to get the camera moving here. So they've got to improve that. I think that will make this kind of a killer control set on a portable PC, but right now it's not living up to its potential there. But there are some other neat features that they've baked into this. You've got a nice little trackpad here that works like a mouse, so you do get some mouse functionality built in. I think the Steam Deck has something similar to that too. There are buttons all over the place that you can configure to do different things. And one of the neat things about the right-hand side controller here is that it has a mouse sensor. So when you detach this and turn it into FPS mode, it will work like a mouse. And I've got a little attachment I'll show you here in a second that allows you to use it more comfortably. And one of the other neat things about the controllers, again, is that they work wirelessly when they are detached. But unfortunately, they don't have any kind of little dock that you can connect them to so that you can use them like a regular controller when they are detached. They have to kind of work like the Wii nunchucks do without that thing you can dock them to. So I'm sure some accessory maker will come up with something there. These will work as a kind of a direct wired connection when they're attached, and they work wirelessly through a custom wireless protocol when they are detached. But let me show you how this mouse thing works real quick. Now in the box, you're going to find this little plastic base, and what you do is attach it to the bottom of the controller here. It kind of magnetically latches on. And when you have it in FPS mode, this becomes a mouse that feels like a joystick. You pick up the other controller here for movement, and the front button here is your left mouse button. And this button actually works from the center here all the way to the top. So you can push it up top here or with your trigger finger. And then the right mouse button is the lower button here. And it actually feels pretty good. It's definitely not as good for me, at least, as a regular mouse might be. I think that's just my muscle memory. but it's certainly a lot more accurate than using the twin stick approach when you're playing these FPS games, and I think you'll find yourself getting used to this pretty quickly. This will, of course, work with a mouse, but if you wanted to not have to carry around anything extra with you, you just flick the switch and you can start playing your game with a mouse interface with just what's attached to the Legion Go here. And I think it's a really creative way to solve this problem, and it works. So pretty neat control idea here. Now, what about the D-pad? Well, the D-pad on this one is not great, although I've seen worse. My issue with it is that there's not much travel to it, so you get a bit of a click when you move in one direction or the other, but you don't get a lot of that tactile feel, especially when you're rocking back and forth. The good news is that I'm not detecting many errant diagonals here, so it seems to be pretty accurate in having your character move the way you want it to move. But the overall size and weight of this, I think, makes it a little difficult to play some of the 8-bit games that you might want to use with a directional pad. It's also very slippery too. So my advice would be to extend out the kickstand and get a controller with a better D-pad for playing some of these games. But I do think the D-pad works fine as a secondary input on games that use the D-pad for things other than direct control. Now, like other PC handhelds, the Legion Go here has a nice carrying case that it comes with. You just have to be careful, though, because there's nothing strapping it into the case. So if you have it unzipped, it's very easy to have it fall out on you. It does have a little tab here to help you remove it quickly. And of course, you can store your little mouse thing in there as well. One thing I liked about the case quite a bit is that it has a little door that aligns with the bottom USB-C port. So you can charge this while it is safely zipped up, so you don't have to worry about knocking it off a desk or a table while you are charging. So that was a nice little feature to the carrying case here. So where am I at here with the Legion Go? Well, I think if you're looking for a Windows gaming handheld and are considering this or the Asus ROG Ally, this is by far the superior product. It feels nicer from a build quality perspective. It's got better controls that are detachable, even though they have to work on that stick sensitivity a bit. It's got the kickstand. You've got the ability to connect up Thunderbolt devices with 2 USB-C 4.0 ports. It's just like they went through all the things that were missing from the Asus device and built something better, and it's definitely better. And of course, it's got the nicer display on board too. So how does it compare against the Steam Deck? Well, over the last week, as I was testing the Legion Go, I left my Steam Deck in its case and didn't touch it for 7 days. And today, as I was working on the review, I finally took the Steam Deck out of its case to pick it up again to see how it feels after getting used to this much larger, bulkier Legion Go. And I gotta say, the Steam Deck is a lot more comfortable to hold. It feels a lot lighter than the numerical differences suggest. As you can see, it is a lot smaller here, and it's also a lot thinner. So there is a big difference here in just the overall comfort level of this device versus the more powerful Legion Go. And where I'm at with this from a recommendation standpoint is that if you are, I think, looking just to take your PC games on the road with essentially a device that's secondary to your gaming computer, the Steam Deck is probably still the way to go. The exception being that if you wanted to download Gamepass games onto it, the Windows operating system on the Legion Go will make it a lot easier to do that versus trying to shoehorn Windows onto the Steam Deck, which is possible, but not as easy. So I think there's still a lot going for the Steam Deck here, even though its performance is certainly a couple of years behind at this point. But if you're someone who likes to play games handheld and then wants to connect your gaming device to a television, I think the Legion Go is probably the better choice there. Not only do you have the dual USB 4 ports that are Thunderbolt compatible, you also have a much more powerful processor inside that can handle games at a higher resolution, yet still delivering playable frame rates. And it is noticeable when you dock one on a television versus the other here. The Legion Go here just looks better because it's able to handle the games, again, at a higher resolution. But it is heavier, it is bulkier, and it doesn't feel as tightly integrated as Valve's entry does here. So I think for every use case, there's going to be some considerations there. But again, I think if you're just looking for something to pick up and play with, the Steam Deck still feels like the better pick up and play device. And the Legion Go here is the better option, I think, if you're looking for your handheld device to become a TV device, and also perhaps if you wanted to have a PC out of the deal as well, because this could easily work quite nicely as a docked desktop solution in addition to being a handheld gaming device. So there you go. That's my thoughts on everything. I am very pleased that we have so many options these days, and that will do it for now. Until next time, this is Lon.TV. Thanks for watching.
This channel is brought to you by the Lon.TV supporters, including gold level supporters Brian Parker, Budley, Hot Sauce and Video Games, Steve Green, and Amda Brown. If you want to help the channel, you can by contributing as little as $1 a month. Head over to lon.tv/support to learn more. And don't forget to subscribe. Visit lon.tv/s.